Good morning, my fellow Canadians. Well, I was out. I was out for a drink with a buddy of mine, and he's a great student of history. And like me, he's better and more knowledgeable, but military history particularly. And we were bemoaning the fact, again, which I've gone on many times, about the failures within the current educational system, the failure to teach history, because we're watching history repeat itself. One of the truisms, and again, I've brought this up before, I love the saying that the only thing that man has learned from the study of history is that man has learned nothing from the study of history. And it's playing out right now in the 21st century, right in front of our eyes. I'm watching the parallels between Putin's actions and rhetoric and Hitler's actions and rhetoric. The seeds of World War II were sown when Hitler went into the Sudetenland in Czechoslovakia because there were a lot of ethnic Germans in the Sudetenland. And he went in militarily to protect these poor ethnic Germans from those dirty Czechoslovakians who were abusing them. Now, there was a twofold purpose to this: test the will of the Western powers to engage militarily. And after the horrors of World War I, England, France were horrified about even the idea of another war, considering the way they were bled. If you look at the numbers dead, and Britain particularly took, for her nation, her size, such a terrible loss in that war. They would do anything to avoid war, and Hitler knew this. He wanted to test their will. If the Western powers had responded militarily and quickly and aggressively, we would not have seen World War II. Hitler would have been pushed back to his boundaries. Now, fast forward to 2014, the Donbass. Again, historical context. 90 years ago, approximately, Stalin starved to death millions of Ukrainians. And into those vacant lands, he moved ethnic Russians. So the Donbass identifies itself as predominantly Russian. It wasn't a long historical context, 90 years. So of course they identify ethnically as Russians, but they lived in Ukraine, what was internationally recognized, and even by Russia in their treaties, that this was recognized as Ukrainian territory. Well, we saw what Putin did with that treaty. Now, in the Donbass, I've heard the same propaganda. Oh, God bless propaganda. Heard the same propaganda that the Russians wanted to form a breakaway republic. They lived in peace side by side with the Ukrainians until the Russians started fomenting cultural divide, shipped in money and agitators to start pushing for an ethnic Russian enclave in Ukrainian territory, a breakaway republic. Most of the people didn't want this. They wanted what people everywhere want: to live in peace, to make your way in the world, to raise a family, see them decently launched, but to live in peace. To live a peaceful life. Have enough to eat, have a decent roof over your head, have a decent job, raise a family. Same as everywhere in the world I've gone, the average person wants all that, nothing else. So you got a fomented rebellion, a rigged election, which a lot of Ukrainians have said was rigged, but pushing this ethnic divide between Russian and Ukrainian. And so they voted to break away. And Ukraine said, no. You live in Ukraine. You don't break away and just arbitrarily form your own republic on our land. So they went in militarily. and the rebels in the Donbass were losing. And then Putin stepped in, brought in armor, artillery, armed the local militias, sent in Russian troops. Now, not formally. Oh no, they're Russian. Well, they're Russians, but these are soldiers. They're on vacation, you see, and they decided to go support their brothers in the Donbass, or they're on leave. You see, these aren't. This isn't sanctioned military action. These are Russian volunteers going to support their Russian brethren in the Donbass. Now, if anybody believes that, I've got some nice swampland in Florida. I can let you have it at a very reasonable price. So you wound up in a protracted war. Ukrainians trying to take back Ukrainian territory with Russian-backed militias and regular troops resisting them. Russia created this mess. Make no mistake. Putin created this mess. It was a land grab. Now, Crimea, he took, same thing. The so-called election where the people voted to become part of Russia. Now he's raped Crimea. The museums have been looted and it's all gone back to Russia. And this is all a constant attempt by Russia, once again, to rewrite history. The Ukrainian artifacts are now listed as Russian artifacts. Historically, we have the same root as the Russians, the Kievan Rus. Kiev was the capital of the Kievan Rus. Kiev was a capital city and a major metropolis when Moscow was swampland on the banks of the Volga River. They hate that. Since Alexander the Great, they've been trying to rewrite history that the Ukrainians were a second-rate peoples. Which they're not. Even their phraseology, calling Ukrainians Malenki Ruskia, little Russians, they're not. No more than Canadians are Americans. Look at Canada and America as a perfect parallel. Who settled America? Predominantly the English. Who settled Canada? The English and the French. And the same could be said of America. A lot of people forget that Louisiana Territory was French territory. So we have a common root, English and French. Do Canadians consider themselves Americans? Or vice versa? No, we are two separate countries with our own identities, our own culture, our own system of governance, our own systems of laws. The same holds true for Ukraine and Russia. But the big difference, the big problem in Ukraine, it is predominantly an agrarian culture. Now, militarily, the Cossacks were a tremendous force of their time, which eventually the Russians have adopted the Cossacks as Russians. They were the best light cavalry of their day. They were Ukrainian. Get away from that. They have attempted to rewrite history. They've destroyed Ukrainian archival material that would refute their claims. Now, again, Hitler and Putin. Hitler took power, shut down a free press, and started pumping out the propaganda. And he didn't even try to hide it. It was called the Ministry of Propaganda. Pumped out the propaganda, pumped out the government lies that Hitler wanted put forward. For 8 years, Putin has been pumping out Russian propaganda on the mainstream media. And finally, just recently, he shut down all independent media, blocked access to the internet, and just pushes his narrative. So the Russian people, for the most part, have no idea of what's going on in the Ukraine. And many Russians believe the Russian version of history, the Ukrainians are a breakaway people, an offshoot of Russia, and should be brought back into the fold by force if need be. And that Basically, Ukraine has no right to exist. Ukrainian culture has no right to exist. And Putin is, and make no mistake about this, embarked on a total eradication of Ukrainian culture and of the Ukrainians as a separate people. That's his end game. Hitler, when he invaded Russia, well, Poland first, of course, and he invaded Russia. And a lot of people, again, forget lessons from history. Poland was carved up in the Russian-German agreements into a Russian area. The Russians went into Poland, and the Germans went into Poland. Now, historically, you look at the Katyn Forest massacre. The Germans were horrified. Catch this, for all the barbarity and what they were doing, they were horrified because there was still a tinge of honor left in the Germans to see all these people barbarically executed, hands bound behind their back, to see all these Polish soldiers shot in the back of the head, just executed en masse. They brought in the Red Cross and said, look, we did not do this. The Red Cross did forensic examination, and they found out that all these executions predated the German occupation. This is when it was Russian territory. Now, every Pole knows the Russians murdered all these soldiers and cadets, just murdered them and dumped them into mass graves. But of course, after the war, when Germany was pushed out, Russia brought in her own independent forensic analysts. And they said, no, we didn't do this. The Germans did this. Stalin pioneered the big lie. Lie, look you right in the eye and lie right to your face. It's like they're cutting your dog's throat to throw it into the soup pot. And they're saying, no, I love pets. I didn't do this. Right in front of your eyes. And there is absolutely no, and their attitude is, yeah, so we're lying. Yeah, there's no subtlety to it. What are you going to do about it? Where do you think Hitler got his idea for the concentration camps? Stalin. What did Stalin do with dissenters? Arbitrary execution, show trials. If you were lucky, you only got exile. Or you wound up in the gulags. And how many people died in the gulags? You look at the horrors of the German concentration camps, and you look at the horrors of the Russian gulags. Like I said, where did Hitler get the idea? Ooh, this works. Lessons from Stalin. Again, Hitler and Stalin, Hitler and Putin. This is not a stretch to make the linkages and the actions. Ethnic cleansing. He wants to suppress and destroy the Ukrainian culture. The treaty that he had signed, that when Ukraine gave up her nukes, he would respect Ukrainian territorial sovereignty. Hitler tore up every treaty he made. Putin has torn up every treaty he made. Every promise he made. And now, in the 21st century, we see a return to the barbarism and brutality that I thought we had globally evolved beyond. Again, the Russian lie. We're only targeting military targets. 90% of Mariupol is now basically rubble, a wasteland. You're going to say that 90% of Mariupol was military? Targeting civilians, deliberately targeting civilians, murdering civilians, mass graves, hiding the bodies, rape, looting, enforced relocation. There's evidence now that they are taking ethnic Ukrainians and forcing them into camps in Russia, and they're going to disperse them into Russia. It's essentially slave labor. Just like the Nazis did with the Russians. Exactly the same parallels. Like I said, looting, rape, murder, butchery, mass destruction, for no strategic or military value. This is just terror. There was no strategic or military tactical advantage to destroying Mariupol. It was terror. The terror bombing of London by the Nazis, the terror bombing of Germany by the Allies, targeting the civilians, nothing other than an attempt to break their will and sheer barbarity. Look what will happen to you if you resist. And that's all they're doing. Look what we will do to you. Terrify the populace. Choke the roads with refugees fleeing the terror. Japanese did that in China. It's a proven and tried military tactic. So we're watching this evolve. But one of the things we did not discuss was the long-term generational effect of this war that Russia or Putin initiated. To this day, Germany bears the scars of the shame of the actions of the Nazis. It is a national shame. It's imprinted now in the German national psyche. The apologies and the shame of what the Nazis did. When I was posted, my last posting to Israel, the number of German tourists who would go to Israel almost by way of apology, spend money in Israel by way of apology for what their people did. They are free of this taint. This is not on them. It was on those who came before. But still, the national shame that's very deep down, but it's still there. When the dust settles from this, if Ukraine manages to survive as Ukraine, when the truth becomes known, the shame, the taint of the Russian people, Russians will be forever branded as brutal, barbaric murderers. I'm not talking about whether it's true or not, whether it's fair or not. No more than every German was a Nazi. Not every Russian supports the war. But a lot of the Germans had no idea what was going on and what the German troops were doing, just like the Russians. The Russians are being kept from the hard realities and truth. Some Russians are fleeing Russia. Some Russians know, but they're staying silent because they face up to 15 years in a Russian prison for refuting Putin's narratives. The map of Europe is being withdrawn, and the seeds are sown, if we are not careful, for a third world war, which will be a war of annihilation. Because will Putin stop if he takes Ukraine? Will he stop? Will he threaten Poland? Will he go toe-to-toe with NATO? He's tested the will now. Now, Ukraine does not have a treaty with NATO or with any neighboring nation. They have no way where they can say, come help us. The nations that do help them do so because they see that in the 21st century, this kind of naked aggression has no place in this global community. But they are helping as much as they can, short of direct military confrontation, bringing in their own troops and armor and artillery. And Putin's made it quite clear he's willing to use the nuclear option. Well, who wants to risk a nuclear war except a madman? Who would even threaten the use of nukes except a madman? Who has threatened the use of nuclear options? Putin. This is going to leave a scar, just like the Balkan conflict, the hard feelings between the Serbians, the Croats, all these disparate ethnic groups now, and the hatred that will carry on from generation to generation, the stories that will percolate down through history, the reminders of the barbarity, the brutality, the ethnic cleansing practiced by different groups. These will continue to perpetuate down through the generations. Where peace was coming, The collapse of the Soviet Union saw these people rediscovering their culture. And they lived in peace. Ukraine never wanted to invade Russia. They lived in peace. And Putin has reinstituted World War II style barbarism and shaken up the world order. So for the love of God, people, if you can help Ukraine, do so. Anything you can do to help them. But I really fear for the global community and what this presages for the world. Slava Ukraini.